I'm going to have to ticket you, and as a guarantee that you'll go pay it, I will have to take your license plate. I had never heard this before. It turns out that while taking license plates or even driver's licenses as collateral for traffic infractions is common practice in Mexico, it is also sometimes used as leverage to get you to pay a mordida, or a bribe to the officer to let you off, especially if you're a foreigner, so I decided to call his bluff and comply. Okay, officer, we can take my plates. When should I go see the judge to pay my tickets and get my plates back? The officer hesitated, taking it back. Well, I don't really know, it could be a while. Well, I'm happy to go pay my fines if I can get them back before Thursday because that's when my flight leaves. Awkward silence while I wait for him to pull out a screwdriver and start removing the car's license plate. He says, I don't really know. Another awkward silence while I still wait for him to take my plates. Well, that's okay. I'm the one who broke the law, so go ahead and take my plates. The officer walked away for a minute and pulled another car over that came down the same road as us. I think that during that time, he realized I wasn't going to pay him mordida. And that the tickets he was threatening were probably just more paperwork than he was willing to do, because when he came back, you know what? I'm just going to let you go with a warning. Awesome, thanks, officer. In the late 90s, my wife and I were just married, just getting started, and we decided to dink it double income, no kids for a few years to save up for a down payment on a house. The dot-com bubble was still rising, and I was a newly minted software developer. I had an entry-level job for a while and then got recruited to a new city and a new job that paid 3 times what I was making before. It was an offer too good to pass up. I ran the numbers, and it was a no-brainer. By living frugally and saving my entire salary, living off just her income, we would easily have enough in a year to put a 20% down payment on a new house. We rented an apartment in the new city that was listed for $950 per month. The landlord was a real estate agent who owned a 2-bedroom condo as an investment property. Let's call him Hank Kowalski. Hank was a thin, gray, no-nonsense guy. He was pleasant enough but prone to a dry demeanor and had no sense of humor. He made a point of explaining that under no circumstances was he responsible for maintaining the garbage disposal and that it was not included in the rental agreement. He would not be responsible for fixing it if it were to break. Okay. He seemed slightly amused by us, a clueless young, newlywed couple, but I could tell he wanted to rent to us because we were very obviously a safe choice as renters. We filled out the rental agreement and the credit check, and this is where my troubles began. Hank looked hard at the credit application where I listed my job title software developer and my income $75K, which for a college grad in the late 1990s was a small fortune. Throw in my wife's salary and we were over 6 figures in income, renting an apartment far beneath our means. Like I said, dinking is the way to go when starting out. I can't believe how much money you make, Hank must have said half a dozen times, muttering under his breath. I explained we were saving to buy a house and that we were only going to stay in the apartment for a year. We might stay a few months after the term is over. Would month to month be okay after a year? Hank assured us that would be fine. We saw Hank only once during the year, and he again mentioned my salary and how he couldn't believe that's what a software developer was making. It was awkward, and I gave a vague reply. Anyway, a year later, we had found a house to buy, signed all the papers, and were making plans to move. The new house wasn't going to be ready until 2 months after our rental lease was up, so I called Hank to ask if we could, as discussed, simply extend the lease by 2 months before moving out. Hank assured me on the phone it would be no problem, and he would send over an extension for us to sign. The extension arrived in the mail, and it included a month-to-month-to-month clause and a $500 increase in the rent. I flipped out and called him. Hank, why are you increasing the rent over 50%? That's too much. That's more than my new mortgage is going to be. It was super condescending. Rocky Moose, it's what the apartment goes for now. I would be losing money by renting it for less. I tried to reason with him, but it was very clear he knew we could afford it, had no choice in the matter, and he was going to screw us over as best as he could. He got angry with me for arguing my point, and I'll never forget his parting words, "You don't have to like it, Rocky Moose. You just have to pay it." My wife and I tried to figure out a way to move out early by putting our furniture in storage for a couple of months and crashing with friends, but it just wasn't going to work out. I swallowed my pride and wrote out the check for $1,450. I wrote a similar check the next month, and then we moved out. I made sure the apartment was spotless before moving, but still, Hank withheld $300 from our security deposit for bullcrap things that were just a way for him to squeeze a few more dollars from the kids who made too much money. $100 for cleaning, sure, but $300 was obscene in my mind. He had screwed me over for $1,200, and there was nothing I could do about it. What made it even more infuriating is that I saw the ad Hank put in the paper after we moved out, and he listed the apartment for rent at only $150 more than we had been paying originally, not the grossly inflated $500 increase. And it didn't rent for a month later. I saw the same ad, and he had lowered the price to $75 more than we had been paying, and I assume it got rented since the ad stopped appearing. Fast forward about 5 years, life is good, the house is good, we have a baby, and even though the dot-com bubble has burst, I'm still employed. One day, out of the blue, I overhear one of my coworkers, let's call him Phil, a senior developer, talking to the guy working the reception desk. "Hey Mike, I'm expecting someone to drop off some paperwork for me. If a Hank Kowalski asks for me, tell him I'll be right out." I freeze and get a taste of bile in my mouth, remembering how I had to write out that name on those checks all those years ago. There is no way it's the same guy, right? I walk over to Phil, who's still by the reception desk. "Phil, how do you know that name, Hank Kowalski?" Phil explains that Hank is his real estate agent. I bought my condo through him several years ago. I'm selling my condo now so I can buy a house, so I'm going to ask him to be my agent again. Do you know him? I tell Phil that I used to rent an apartment from Hank and describe what he looks like. Phil confirms the description. It's the same guy. Wow, small world, right? And then, right then, the front door to the office opens and in walks Hank. I stand in disbelief. He's carrying a folder of papers and doesn't recognize me. Phil and Hank shake hands and they talk for a few moments. I stand there silently, wondering what to do. Phil finally says, "Hank, this is my friend Rocky Moose. I think you may have already met." "Well, yes, hello Hank. Good to see you again. My wife and I were your tenants a few years ago on X Street. Remember? I'm the software developer who rented for a year, saving to buy a house. Well, this is where I work here was." Hank's eyes indicated he now remembered me, and he's starting to put it all together. We shake hands and he says yes, of course he remembers, and asks how we are doing. "Oh, we're just fine, thanks for asking. Phil says that you're his real estate agent." Small world, isn't it? Hank nods pleasantly. He still doesn't remember the details of our last conversation. I do some quick math in my head. This is the early mid-2000s. The real estate market is very strong, and it's easy money for any agent. The crash of 2008 is still a few years in the future. I start to think out loud. Selling the condo for around $150,000 to $500,000 range. So that's $6,500 to $20,000 in commissions for an agent getting 3% on the sale and the purchase. That's a good commission for the agent, isn't it? Hank's eyes flash, and I can tell he remembers everything about me now. Phil is surprised by my passive-aggressive tone, and I'm enjoying the uncomfortable silence. Hank deflects my question, saying it's complicated, and tells Phil to send back the papers as soon as possible. He shakes hands with Phil, looks at me, nods, and goes to leave. "It was really good to see you again," Hank I call behind him. He exits the building, and as the door is still shutting, I say a bit too loudly so that Hank can hear, "Phil, don't sign anything just yet. I have a story to tell you." Phil looks at me and says, "Rocky, what the hell was that all about?" He looks pissed and confused by my behavior. I tell Phil the whole story, the rent, the $500 increase, the security deposit. "You don't have to like it, you just have to pay it everything. Phil, you can't use this guy to sell your condo and buy a house. I hate him. He's evil. I'll help you find another real estate agent. Just use anyone but Hank." So the great thing about Phil is that, well, he's a great guy. He says he's a little surprised at my story, and has always known Hank as a straightforward guy, but I totally see him doing that to you. He admits, "There's no way I could use him now, what a jerk." Then Phil's eyes lit up a bit. "What do you want me to say when I fire him?" I have special feelings for Phil now. We came up with a plan, and I made sure there were some key phrases in Phil's repertoire. We planned it all out together in advance. My only regret is that I didn't get to see Hank's reaction in person. Soon, a day later, when Phil made the following phone call, I stood behind him listening. "Hi Hank, it's Phil calling." "Yeah, about that. I've decided to get some other quotes from other agents. I'm not going to sign up with you." There is a pause. No, you shouldn't give a discount. You'll be losing money if you did that." Another pause. "No, this is just a decision I've made. No, it has nothing to do with Rocky Moose." The third pause. "Well, you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye, click." And it was the greatest revenge I could have ever imagined. Through a chance meeting years later, Hank got screwed out of $20,000 in easy commissions. And the best part is, Hank absolutely knew it had everything to do with Rocky Moose. This goes back a long time to the mid-1980s. I was working for a fellow named Max who built a business from the ground up. He came to Canada from Europe as a child, a World War II refugee with his parents, penniless. It's a real success story and the nicest guy you would ever want to work for. We see a few posts in this sub about jerk bosses. Max was the opposite. His business was built around packaging. It was a slitter rewinder operation. To illustrate, this is a slitter. It takes wide rolls of material, slits it into strips, and then rewinds it onto cores. Max developed and patented a process that was able to put 15 to 20 times more material onto a finished core than any of his competitors. You've seen a roll of masking tape? Picture a stack of 10 rolls, about 2 or 3 times the diameter, but all wound onto a single core. We made a number of products. You know the infuriating tear tape that you use to open a pack of cigarettes or a CD? Yeah, we made that. We also had a client in Germany that would send us big rolls of raw elastic material, which we would slit and then send back to them. It was used for, if you can believe it, baby diaper legs, the elastic that holds the diaper to the infant's leg gently but firmly. The Germans once visited our factory. Max treated them royally, and they took photos of everyone, including the machine operators next to the machines, the raw materials, and the finished product. Now, for those of you who are not parents, babies are little crap factories, and the baby diaper business is enormous. We're talking about a billions of dollars industry here with stiff competition, and Max's process was saving this company hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. It was a very lucrative contract. So the client's contract is coming up for renewal in a month or two, and Max isn't seeing much in the way of interest. Remember, if they go with a competitor, they will have to shut down their machines much more frequently to change the rolls of elastics for the legs. This doesn't make much sense, as it would slow production down considerably. Max reaches out again and gets a very non-committal response. Something's fishy. Now, you have to remember that this business is Max's baby, and he was both the nicest guy and one of the most tenacious and determined men I have ever met. So Max arranged for some detectives in Germany to investigate. They reported that the client hadn't retooled their machines to accept the competition's spools, nor did they appear to have any plans to. The detectives also discovered that some people connected with the German factory had set up a factory of their own, a slitter factory. Yep, those sneaky guys were about to open their own plant to supply spools of baby diaper leg elastic to the diaper factory and save themselves the cost of shipping the material to Canada for processing. And they were going to duplicate exactly the rolls they were getting from us. So Max waits until the moment the renewal option on the contract expires, then slaps his new factory with an injunction for patent infringement. Well, now the crap has hit the fan. The baby diaper factory has a stock of elastic that will run out in days. For them to retool their machines to accept a competitor's roll will take weeks. They have commitments to the brand name companies to package and retail diapers. So guess who starts burning up the phones to reach Max? Max, knowing that they are spending a fortune on transatlantic shipping to move the product, renegotiates to include a much higher price for processing, as well as a clause where he handles shipping costs, again at a boost to the price. The factory really has no choice. They have to sign. It's that or take massive non-compliance penalties from their customers. Then, having cut a deal where he makes a good price per load of product to handle the logistics, he turns to the new factory itself. You see, they had invested heavily in new slitters. They modified them to produce Max's spools. They couldn't be used in production due to the injunction and couldn't be returned to the manufacturer due to the modifications, and they were looking at a long and protracted legal battle that was set to cost a bundle in lawyer fees. Max offered to drop the legal battle and buy the factory at much less than it was worth. They had no choice. They had to sell. And it was in the same city as the baby diaper factory. So Max now bumped his price and was compensated for shipping per load of product as if the load came from overseas, but actually it was just down the road. We ended up using the excess production capacity in Canada to market these spools to North American diaper factories, and the factory in Germany started making inroads into the European markets. All in all, it was a nice win for Max and put him into an unusually good mood for quite some time.